Welcome to the NGOCC podcast that comes your way every Friday at exactly 15:30, sharing with you some of the diverse issues that are affecting women in society, but also wanting to advocate for positive masculinity. I'm so excited to be your host today. My name is Chiwesa. And of course, I'm not alone on today's episode. I am joined by a very great woman who will introduce herself. Now, remember, March is a Women's Month. And of course, people from all walks of life annually come together to commemorate and celebrate the impacts that women have on society. So today we get to discuss the theme of this year's Women's Day, as well as wanting to touch a little on the importance of a woman and the impact that she has. So I am super excited because guess what? This year's theme was for all women and girls, equality, rights, and empowerment. Welcome to the NGOCC podcast.
Thank you, and what a pleasure, and to everybody watching and listening, very good to be here.
I am so happy to have you on the podcast. I'm literally holding myself. I'm like, behave, don't scream. So please,
it's a pleasure for me to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So please,
Thank
maybe
you.
just introduce yourself for people that don't know you.
Okay, so in my 8 to 5, I am currently heading communications for the Trade Kings Group. Mm-hmm. I'm also national advisor for the Commonwealth Women's Network in Zambia. That is, of course, being relevant to the conversation. I have co-founded a development trust that is called Bridge Network for Transforming Africa, out of my passion to see economies transcend the limitation, especially of poverty. And currently, looking at studying development communications.
Wow. Girls, are you listening? Madam Bridget, I know you're very passionate about women and the girl child.
Yes.
I respect the fact that you are heading a very big organization in the, corporate communications, because it's one of the toughest roles to take up. You have to ensure that the organization is visible and it's out there. So how do you firstly manage to juggle your personal life and heading such a big organization before even dive into the topic of discussion?
Okay, so the first thing that I have done is to define the fact that it is me in my being that I have to manage, okay? So sometimes you think it's only the things that you have to do that you have to manage. But if if somebody's watching right now, all I want you to learn from how do I balance is, first and foremost, I treat myself as an energy spirit being, which means I'm very particular about how I look after my body. It's the reason I'm very, very passionate about my exercise. I'm also very intentional about how I manage my mind and how I develop my mind, which means exposing myself to different things. Because when I realized and got confirmation to the truth that because I'm energy and I'm spirit, that's what needs to be managed. Yeah. So my body has to be managed. My body, my mind, and my emotions and how everything comes together have to be managed and balanced. So I'm very, very particular with the food that I eat, how I live my everyday life, the kind of relationships that I keep. I avoid the negative ones, because at the end of the day, I am an energy being, and because I am, and because I'm spirit, I do not want to expend my energy the way I shouldn't. I also challenge myself to grow every day. So I wake up every day with a concept that I'm learning. So I want you to imagine that, to be able to do PR and communications for Trade Kings Group is daunting. It means that every single day I have to be on top of, information. I have to be on top of knowledge. I have to be able to mobilize any form of meeting across the sector. I meet different kinds of people. I also manage my knowledge intentionally. I learn every day. So, and I'm also a mother, besides that, to 2, 3 teenage children plus one that is a niece, but I've brought her up, and so that's essentially
Your
my third child.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's also that side of me, the mother side of me. It's at this particular point when they're teenage that it's becoming a bit lonely because, they are beginning to live their own lives. But I've also been intentional about being their friend. So it's also balance between that side of family, the family, which is, my mother and all my siblings and everything. I'm very particular. But importantly, I'm very guarded about my relationship with God, because that's my source. I mean, I don't have any other place to draw strength from apart from the way I practically relate to the God that is inside of me. So I'm also very particular about the spiritual side of it.
Nice. I always love how you refer to God as source. I love how you understand emotional intelligence and the understanding that a human being is energy. And I think we're going to talk about that. But before we digress, I want you to maybe just give us your own understanding of this year's International Women's Day theme.
Very exciting. And really, firstly, I must congratulate NGOCC for, the role that the organization has played this far to continue mobilizing the women and championing the cause, of course. And, the kind of work that has been done to lead the movement has been commendable. And speaking to the theme, all women and girls, equal rights and empowerment and equality. I mean, it couldn't have come at a better time than now. And the reason I'm saying that is that the world is going through such phenomenal change. There is major shift in so many ways, more than one. And until we are owning, the narrative of transformation and how it actually speaks to girls and women, and of course, what is being called positive masculinity, we are unable to champion the cause of positioning women as strong agents of change and influencers, especially in the lane of development. So the theme is very appropriate. It's at the time that we must go back to the drawing board and look at what we've done so far for the girls in the area of equality. For the women, first and foremost for the girls, do they actually understand? When we say equality, what does that actually mean? Are we owning that narrative? And, of course, for the women, because we've got different categories of women. We've got the young women that are girls and growing into young women. We've got the woman in the grassroots. We've got the professional woman. And then we've got the women that have gone ahead of us. And then we've got the women, in the corporate space. But importantly, we've got just the women put together. The reason I'm giving that aspect is that at a point where we are, I think we need to look at the woman from her psychographics perspective. And only then will equality make sense, which bears in mind the fact that we have to partner with the men. For the girls, with the growth of internet, the digital for them to understand what those three elements mean. What is empowerment and what is, women's rights? What does that actually look like from practical terms? I think that we need to mainstream becoming. We need to mainstream development. We have to mainstream being a part of a disruptive world. I mean, lo and behold, we woke up one morning and there was no USID. I mean, by the time you're shifting that conversation to the real meaning of what does actually women's rights look like in an environment where now we're being called to be self-sustainable. What does it mean for the girl? What about the woman in the rural area? So the point I want to drive is the fact that the theme couldn't have come at this particular time because I think old patterns are being disrupted. The old ways of looking at things is being changed, and we don't have a choice but to come to the table.
Now, you've spoken about mainstreaming this particular thing. And my question really is, do you think girls are involved in these practices? Because I have seen every year we have a theme, okay? But from my own observation, I haven't seen quite enough change, okay, or people really paying attention to the theme. Most of the time it's just, okay, this is the theme for Women's Day, and that's it.
I have a problem with that, actually. Because, it's by nature for us women to connect and to relate easily. And so we successfully host, solidarity events like we were doing yesterday. But the question that begs to be answered is then what? This is why, from where I'm sitting, not only wearing different hats as, I introduced myself, be it from the Commonwealth Network for Women or just me as a woman that is championing an initiative I'm calling Ukazi, which is the identity in a woman. I think the most important thing that we need to pay particular attention to is starting with the girls. Meaning, we have to package the message of what is called equal rights empowerment for the girl, so that we begin to inculcate and program and reprogram what has been put in the DNA. If I give an example of my daughter right now, who is 17, 18 years old, she's seen me breaking barriers. She's seen me single parent her and her brother and of course her sister. And in there, she's thinking, okay, so what leaf am I picking from her? And so I think we need to change the narrative That's the only way it's going to become attractive. And by changing the narrative, for the last 30 years from the Beijing Declaration, I think what we have done is we've confronted the inequalities. And so we have been fighting. Not only have we been fighting, we have been questioning. We've also been, perchance, trying to understand the extent of the inequalities. If I reflect on that presentation that came from the University of Zambia in research, we have made a certain degree of progress in health, a certain degree in education, but they're still wanting in the economic emancipation of a woman. We're also still wanting in the representation of leadership. That in itself is an indication that we need to go back to the drawing board, especially with the young people in mind. So to zero into your question, I think we've left the young girls behind, where the conversation is not excitable. And because it's not excitable and it's not being current and it's not being relevant, how then do we structure the messaging, the initiatives, the action, to the extent that it becomes embodied by every young woman, and also bearing in mind the positive masculinity? So there is a generational gap that we need to particularly pay attention to. And I mean, from where I'm sitting, I think it's urgent.
Now, talking about the engagement of the girl child, I'm just thinking, don't you think it's also necessary, perhaps maybe to start holding, for example, the current initiative that you're coming up with, have certain meetings with girl children? I know there's different initiatives currently going on. I won't mention, I'm not advertising. Yeah, but I know there's different initiatives currently going on. Don't you think messages can be packaged better?
Yes.
Because I feel they are too serious for the girl child, especially for this generation.
Yes. I mean, not only when we do events, for instance, is in NGOCC, we have lined up an app. And that particular app is, a self-development app. And that's because from my own personal experience, I mean, when I tell this side of my story, people are like, when was that? Because there aren't any signs.
Please tell us.
I suffered a lot of self-confidence issues when I was younger.
Okay.
Really? And a lot of low self-esteem issues, which affected a number of things until I redefined my relationship with God. And just when I realized that in him, I live, I move, and have my being, I was going for the kill. But what that meant was that I needed to reprogram myself constantly. So the app, for instance, is there to help the young woman, the women, professional women, because the issue of women not being confident in themselves, I think, has been engraved in us. And sometimes we tend to be a bit more physical than we are inward. And that, affects the way we relate. Of course, there's been more opportunities to bring the education side up to speed, to bring the leadership, to bring the economic development for a woman. But I think that if it has to happen holistically, the men and the boys have to be brought on board. And whatever it is, we have to be driven by a value system that brings to the fore what is being called positive masculinity.
Are you including the boys in your initiative?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So what we're calling Be Man is looking at the men and the boys.
Also, it's Be Woman and Be Man.
Yes.
Okay.
So the Be Man, the first time I realized what it is God had deposited in a man is when my father died. And then I became intentional about my son, who I have been single parenting. It is the men that protect. It is the men that have the sense to direct. It is the men that have a way of disciplining. And for me, having brought up my two kids, as a single mother, with all due respect, I owe and respect, my ex-husband, who's father to my children, the role that he has played with them. The one thing that a father, a masculine side brings is a sense of protection, a sense of direction, and a sense of nurturing in a totally different way, which is visionary. Whereas the aspect that the woman brings in is the nurturing side. So when the two come together, I think creation is made complete. This is why I'm promulgating the fact that the narrative for what is called women empowerment, 2025 going forward, must be changed. It is that which brings about the uniqueness in both the men and the women, meaning we're speaking to the girl and the woman. And when the two come together, what needs to be mainstreamed in our minds is not even so much our private lives. That is something that I have as a challenge. Yes, we needed to be empowered as women, but we need a cadre of women that are going to impact the community. The poverty levels in rural areas in Zambia is still alarming. Not long ago, I was in Chipata, even just during Chwala, and for some reason last year, I went to Eastern Province quite a bit.
Okay.
We still have situations where women are walking long distances to go and deliver. And they not only sometimes walk long distances, they actually are camping at hospitals. I mean, just during the Ntwala, through the Trade Kings Foundation, I was donating at the Mwami Hospital. And some young girls, thanks to the vice called teenage pregnancy, are waiting to deliver their babies because they're coming from very far. And, they have to wait until their babies are due at a hospital. And if you look at the state in which those mother shelters are, what am I saying? If government is going to run successfully, the partnership already, I'm speaking now to the organizational capacity for what is called Women and Men Together. We need to be honest that we are carrying a development model where we don't measure what we have done. We're not aware and are using what we have. What do we have as a resource? The first resource that we have are the people themselves. Is that packaged? I mean, because I'm coming from a branding perspective out of my marketing experience, everything that is going to be visible has to be packaged. And if it has to be packaged, it has to be packaged for development. I am saying the conversation should be creation and development in partnership between men and women, boys and girls.
Wow. That was a mouthful and very, very insightful. You are still watching the NGOCC podcast with me, Chivesa Cecilia Mongulube. And of course, I am not alone. I am chilling with the girl. One and only ma'am Bridget. And of course, our topic of discussion is the International Women's Day theme. And of course, it's a Women's Month. And we just want to know and learn how can we be better people and how can we just ensure that the themes that we said every year, at least they are actualized in some way.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is your call to government regarding this year's theme? What are some of the things that you think government should put in place to ensure that the themes are really called to action?
I'd like to appeal to His Excellency the President to take us back to the gender being a ministry.
Yeah.
I know, he has passion for the women. And I know that in his mind and in his heart, there must have been a reason why we were downgraded from being a ministry to being a division. But my appeal really is that we need to develop an ecosystem that partners with the entire stakeholders that influence society. And by that, I mean it is family, which is, the lowest capillarity of the presence of influence. And then it is government itself, which looks at the leadership, which is promulgating the development intentionally and creating a narrative to grow the economy. It is education, which ensures that there is growth. It is media, which ensures that information and knowledge is being passed onto. It is religion, which ensures that, the faith-based organizations are part of this narrative. What am I saying? I'm saying we need to come to the party together. I do not like this pressure that is placed on government because government is you and me. And so we have to be intentional in terms of how we are transforming the quality of citizenry that we are, which then speaks to how we act and how sometimes we come across as entitled. If I do not take development at my individual level in my own hands, if I do not do what is called my work with passion, and yet I turn around and I say the government should do X, what am I saying? I'm taking myself out of the equation of the fact that my actions, the way I think, the way I act, my attitudes is speaking to what directly is called development for this country. I am saying collaboration. I am saying partnership. I am saying mobilization. I am saying even what is called private sector in this country needs to be brought together to mobilize. It is private sector for profit that creates wealth and innovates. It is private sector which is not. So for me, I am trying to demystify what is called private sector because private sector is everyone that is not government. And so there's private sector for profit and there's private sector for social change. NGOCC is private sector. It could have the element which is called civil society, but because it is a non-governmental organization, it is private sector. I am saying we need to come together. So in the Development Trust, we do have a platform we're calling Sonkano, which is intentional about bringing parties together to be aware of where the pitfalls are for government, not only government, for all stakeholders so that we can champion development for Mother Zambia.
Very true and insightful. Now, in the inception of this podcast, you talked about source. And before we wrap it up, I said we'd talk about it a little bit later. How do you think understanding oneself and where you are coming from and who you really are is going to help a young girl or a woman out there to become a better person?
So I will share a little bit of a story of how I discovered that painfully. I was once attacked by thieves, by bandits. And they entered my house and took everything that was to my name. Not only did they take everything to my name, when they had entered the house, they were armed. And at that particular time, the only thing that I had with me was the belief, the faith, and the confidence that they could take everything else, but they could save my life and save the life of my children. At that particular time, in the 3 hours, and this was like 2, 3 a.m. in the early hours of the morning in the neighborhood of Roma. I'm not too sure whether you were there at that particular time. But if you remember an incident where President Edith Nawakwi's daughter was attacked and killed, it was that time, and it was the same bandits. So when they entered my house and attacked me and took everything to my name, the only thing that I had at that particular time was this sense of presence, that there is God that covers us. There's God that protects us. And I'm saying not the God that we go to gather and fellowship about, the God that is so personal that I could hear the voice. At that particular time, my lady, it was in their power to rape me in the presence of my kids. It was in their power to take me away from my lovely kids that I love dearly. It was in their power to kill the 4 of us, my kids and our help. And it was in their power. But I heard a voice. I heard a voice that told me, don't be scared. I'm right here with you. And it was very audible. And believe it or not, audible to the extent it gave me the confidence. They were asking me ridiculous questions like, where is the money? I reached out to where my handbag was. They had already taken out the money. They had taken out the bag. What am I saying? It changed my context of God. Because sometimes, even as Christians or any other religion, we are believing in the God that is outside of you. I mean, when scripture says that, shall we make man in our own image? It means that, and I have grown up curious. I ask a lot of questions. And I remember when I was going through some challenge in my life, and I said, dear God, if you do exist inside of me, where exactly do you exist? I mean, where am I supposed to perceive your presence? And so I started to read on neuroscience. I started to read on how the brain works. I started to read on faculties of mind. I started to read the intelligence of the body. Can you imagine that as you and me are sitting right here, if you've already had your meal, the body is working, the oxygen is running. What am I saying? The first technology, the first mystery that I discovered was myself. So the project that you need to be paying attention to, if I'm speaking to someone out there, is you need to understand who you are. And when I discovered that the who I am is the pure consciousness that I am, we only honor that when somebody dies. And then I also discovered that the intelligence that runs through me and operates everything is the God in me. And then I also discovered that the element called genius is not a preserve of a few. All you have to do is break the limitation that you are not genius, because genius is when you pursue running your life in partnership with God, because through you, he is excellent, and through you, he's intelligent. But we've been taken to school and been made and programmed, socialized and cultured into believing that we're limited. So I live every single day of my life transcending the limitation first and foremost of how I perceive myself. And so I have a definite chief aim, and this definite chief aim is that because I'm one with God, and that God is my source. I mean, people want to misconstrue that as soon as you say God is source, which God is she talking about? God is my creator and is the source of my life. And from there, I draw my identity. I draw my confidence. Every morning when I wake up, I'm always saying, Mwelesa, as I wake up, as I step, just for the fact that you've given me good health, I am stepping in your shoes and operate as me. And that's what drives me in everything that I do, because then I'm paying attention to where is my gap. If I be God, if I be Christ, conscious of Christ, how shall I handle this situation? The piece of work that I have to deliver. So for me, I pursue practical Christianity, because at the moment, we have a kind of Christianity where you're praying one thing, but your life is saying another. You are saying one thing, but you're acting another. I have a problem with that kind of Christianity or any kind of religion. I would like God to be practical in my life and everything that I do.
Wow. Wow.
And my God is that practical. Yes.
I still want
practical.
to listen. I was going to ask you about other religions which you just incorporated in your conclusion.
Yes. I took time just to understand all the religions. Because again, I came from a question. Dear God, if there's only one you, God, who makes the clouds and the seasons, who makes possible that, a human being comes together in what is called DNA? I mean, dear God, what's with the 12,000 religions? So I came to a conclusion that, religion is, of course, a human constructed. There's only one God, and different understandings of that God is what has created religions. So I honor and respect all religions. And I came to discover that if you don't have a personal relationship with your God, so the first religion you need to have is a religion with you and your God, which is personal. And so for me, my religion with my God, I call it Limitless 369. And for that, I am pursuing the practical element. Shall I be made in the image of God? What does that mean in my body? What does that mean in my mind? What does it mean in my relationships, with family, with work, with everything that I'm doing? And I pursue that every single day that I live.
Wow. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I have been out here chilling with Madam Bridget. And of course, this is the NGOCC podcast that brings you diverse issues affecting women, society, and of course, we advocate for positive masculinity. We want to see a better world out there. We want to see a reduction in the number of gender-based violence cases. We want to see a reduction in the number of people that are being found dead. We want to see a reduction in the poverty, in our country. We want to see an empowered woman, a better man out there in order for us to have a better Zambia. So before we wrap up our show, I'll give you an opportunity to give your concluding remarks to the people out there, to the young girl, to the young man, to the woman who wants to maybe take up a big position, but they are in doubt. Remember, we launched a campaign, Her Time Is Now campaign.
Exciting.
Yes.
I want to hear more about that.
Yeah.
Her time is now.
So this campaign basically is just advocating for women to take up more roles of leadership, especially in the political fraternity. So perhaps you could speak to that woman out there who has doubt and they feel like they can't do it. They feel like it's not meant for them. There's that mindset of saying, Virina beni. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so first and foremost, if somebody is watching me this afternoon, trust me, I'm coming from a history where I doubted myself. I feared so much. And until the first thing that I did was to change my relationship with God, which changed the way I see myself. But after that, I'm saying you need to face your shadow. And when I say your shadow, these perceptions that limit you, you have to be honest about them. There's no amount of compensation in the name of how good I look or, how expensive my hair is. Because what finally shows up is the true meaning of who you are. So if I'm speaking to somebody out there, be honest with yourself in terms of where you are. What are you fearing? What is standing in the way of you becoming the best version of yourself? Because until I looked at those habits and attitudes and behaviors that were actually limiting me. But what is interesting is that for me, God has thrown me to the deep end of a swimming pool to swim. Because when I arrived at Trade Kings, I was like the second woman to be employed. And I had to prove the fact that a woman could carry the brand of the now Fortune 500 African company. What am I saying? When you confront your shadow, you then be able to confront your weaknesses. When you confront your weaknesses, you will find that, may I say this to you, the flip side of your weaknesses is your strength. So I realized, for instance, for me, when I feared, I procrastinated, I broke promises, and I'm not ashamed to show you that side of me. But until I realized that I needed to confront that, did I actually discover the fact that I'm designed to transform? The reason that I have the strength to stand in front of people is because I'm naturally born to lead. The reason I want to teach is because, there's a mystic inside of me, the curiosity inside of me. What am I saying? Treat yourself as an invaluable project. Invest in who you are. And when I say invest in who you are, spirit, soul, and body. Sometimes I wonder why women won't pay attention to look after their bodies. They look after their bodies to look good. But look after your body by exercising it, feeding your body well. Look after your relationship with your God, because that is everything. When I pray and when I trust and when I believe and when I affirm and I pay attention to the thoughts that I'm holding and the emotions, my God is faithful to say, in him I believe and I trust. He would show me the way. Because being guided by the world standards is what is affecting us women. There are standards of different schools of thought, but the only greatest school of thought is the thought of principle, which is God in practical terms. So if I'm speaking to a woman out there, the real meaning of empowerment is empowerment inside out. Pay attention to your mental faculties. Of course, dress how you want to be addressed. That is the most important thing.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen.
Dress how you want to be addressed.
That's before we even close. That's a very important aspect. And maybe before you even go, you could touch a little on that one. You've seen how in this particular generation now, I'm part of it.
Yes.
We are the Gen Z, and we dress differently. Do you think that has a huge impact with regards to our profile or our future jobs?
Of course it does. I mean, if the way you carry yourself, we like I said, like I carry myself as an energy being, and because I'm spirit, and everything that I then clothe outside, my body speaks volumes. The point I want to say is, the only thing that is there to be judged when you show up physically is the way you're dressed.
Yeah.
Now, if you allow anybody to judge you based off of fabric or the shape or how, I mean, I couldn't say this better. I can only but emphasize, it matters where you are and how you want to be perceived. And I underline the word perceived. There's no way you're going to be half-dressed and you are at an interview and you expect that the company is going to say, I think we've got ourselves somebody who can lead. Now, may I say to anybody, you need to position yourself as an influence. You need to position yourself as a change maker. And if you're going to position yourself as a change maker in the respect of the uniqueness that you carry, please dress how you want to be addressed. The reason I'm very particular about how I put myself together is because when I discovered that I am born to lead, it means that there are people who just follow me out of the way I dress.
Yeah.
But they need to know me a little bit more because I do have the broken side of me. But if when I dress up only exposing that sometimes I'm looking for attention, because the way you dress up sometimes says you're looking for attention. The question is, what kind of attention? So why should you be looking for attention? I am never looking for attention. I'm always looking to impact, influence, and contribute. It's the reason I'm very, very particular about how I dress. So you have to have a definite chief aim that speaks to the way you want to be perceived, that speaks to your wardrobe, that speaks to the substance that you carry, that speaks to the brand called you. If you are a brand, be careful what you wear.
There you have it. Well, I have been chatting with Madam Bridget and I have been so honored. I hope that you too have learned something from this interview. We'll need you back on this podcast for yet another topic. It's a yes, please and thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Cecilia Mungulube. This is the NGOCC podcast. For now, it's a goodbye.